Hey everybody, before we get started, I just want to remind you this episode is brought to you by patrons like FGO Comics, Qua, Jeremy Vasquez, Kylie Denton, Nestor Flores, Sodasan0424, and Video Gamer 75. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies, and it'll really help us out. Thanks for your support, everybody. Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll a 5-star. Yes, that's right. It's time for a new Wanted. We're doing stuff. Again, it's been a while. Been a little bit. Been since Halloween, actually. And then our next one will be Christmas. So funny how that works. But we'll have a little bit of a string here and there, get some stuff out of the way. So today's, we're going to be talking about Abigail Williams, obviously. Thumb, title, all that other nonsense. Got her banner coming up. And we got some interesting mechanical stuff to talk about later, because she's the first in a new class, but we'll get there. So there's some other stuff to talk about first, because in case you don't know, this is Wanted. This is our special little show we do to kind of do analysis on 5 stars that are coming up, especially limited ones, but we'll also usually do story locks and permanents, because we need to, just talk about stuff and compare, and it lets you know if you want to roll on something, because you never know what's good, what's bad, sort of thing. Right? You want to know what's going on here, and whether it's worth spending your precious quartzes. So, the normal format for this, in case you don't know, is we talk about a servant's real-life history, who they were in history or folklore. We talk about their lore with a capital L, so we talk about anything they do in Fate and stuff. Some of these characters are recurring Fate characters or are mentioned in other works. Then we talk about their mechanics. Actually get into the, the nitty-gritty of what they do as a servant, because a lot of people roll for mechanics. And finally, we talk about their rarity. Not their star rarity, but how frequently their rate-ups are, because this can also really impact you. There are a lot of people who are like, oh, I can't possibly roll on this servant now, there's another banner I like coming, or the opposite, where like, oh, I have to roll on this banner now because, we're not going to see them for like 2 years, and it'll be in the middle of something else. So, with all that said, we're going to talk about foreigner Abigail Williams. And, so, obviously, in case you don't know or didn't know by the time this came out, because obviously it will coincide with banner announcements and stuff, there will probably be some slight spoilers for Salem in here. So watch the fuck out. But I don't think a lot of FGO players weren't at least familiar with Abigail as a rollable character before now. But, alright. Let's go ahead and work into those stuff. So, first up, real-life history. Yes, Abigail Williams is actually a historical figure. She is reported as a resident of the town of Salem, born as Abigail Rogers in the year 1680. The witch trials starting in 1692 when she was about 12. She and her cousin Betty Paris, with 2 R's, were one of the first people to accuse / show weird symptoms of demonical stuff, and so on and so forth. Other than being in the initial report, the accusation started there in the early levels. She disappears from written records almost immediately after 1692, and no one is sure where she went. We're not even sure of her date of death. It's, according to some reports, that at the age of 17, she died in 1697, but we really don't know. She just completely vanishes from the historical record after being part of the kickoff of this major event in American history, in, early American history. So, yeah, it's a whole weird thing going on there that's kind of interesting. Got a lot of weird stuff. Of course, we also like to talk about pop culture stuff. Most people probably have heard of her from the play by Arthur Miller and its adaptations, The Crucible, where she has been aged up to about 17 and is more of an, what would you call it, a antagonistic, an instigation role in the story, which is not necessarily founded by her historical record and does not directly come up in Fate, interestingly enough. But yeah, there's that. It's one of those little weird things you got going on there, major figures that immediately disappear from historical record. And so in Fate, obviously, Abigail is the central character. She's right there on the, banners and stuff, the intro and all that for Salem. So obviously she's a major character throughout this saga. And in a lot of ways, she's really the central character, and you guys are just spear carriers, but we'll save my discussion for Salem as a story chapter for a different time, with more people. So yes, obviously she's important, and presumably if you're watching this, because, her banner comes out as the part 2 to that setup, you've already played through the story or most of it, and are kind of familiar with her character, and can kind of see stuff and things that, make you understand her, as far as it goes. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot to drag out there. Hopefully you know what's going on. And as far as I'm aware, Abigail does not have any other major storyline involvements after Salem, for reasons. So, the only thing to do is to dive into the mechanics. So before we even look at Abigail's inherent stats, she is a brand new class, so we should talk about that class, because various elements of class design kind of work into a unit. So, first of all, what are actual class advantages? Foreigner's a new class, so Foreigners, first of all, do 200% damage, i.e. double damage to themselves. So they take and deal extra damage to Foreigners. Alter Egos are the usual super effective against Foreigners. They deal double damage and take half. And Berserkers, strikingly enough, are weak to Foreigners. They deal half damage and take double damage, which is slightly more than Berserkers usually take. I think it's... Or do they take 200 from everybody? No, it's... Oh, no, okay, so it is, they normally do double. So that's not that alien. I can never remember, because it's a little weird, because I think with Berserkers, they do 1.5 damage to everybody, including themselves, but everybody else does double damage back. So, the damage they take back is normal, the fact that they deal half damage to Foreigners is not. And Foreigners are associated with external powers and entities that are beyond human comprehension, kind of, also just from space, in the case of Mysterious Heroine XX. But this is presumably why they're strong against Berserkers, who are literally empowered by madness, so they're kind of goobery. Foreigners are gracious enough to have a base damage multiplier of 1.0, so their damage is their damage. Not that weird. And our 2 5-star Foreigners, because there are only 3 out so far in JP, I'm sure that will change. We've eventually gotten a decent spread of alter egos, including a welfare and a story lock, and there is a permanent moon cancer now, who is not BB. Dunk on everybody who mocked me for saying that other units besides BB could be moon cancer. But anyway, they'll eventually fix that, but for now you're looking at mostly limiteds. The 2 5-stars have the same attack, and Abigail actually has slightly better HP, so currently she is top of the HP amount for Foreigners. And as you can see, the overall Foreigner star weight is higher. It's on the higher end. It's not the tippy top, like, for instance, Riders are about 200-ish. So it's not the toppest, but it's pretty high. And honestly, I think, despite all being the same class, I think they have some high variance in there. Yeah. So they all have different star generation, which is not typical. It seems fairly unique to their setup. Because Hokusai, for instance, has a 7% star generation. MHXX has a full-blown 15%, whereas Abigail is slightly below 15. So this seems like they have a little bit more variance in that than other classes usually get. But overall, you can kind of see where they're coming from there. So, looking at Abigail's specific stats, you'll notice her NP gen is pretty small. It's below average, but to compensate for this, she has a caster-style deck with a Buster Noble Phantasm, which has a very, very high hit count, and very high hit counts on her Quick and Buster and Extras, too. So, overall, it shouldn't be too terrible if you're getting the right chains. If you're not drawing her cards in the right setup, it's probably a little sluggish if you're just getting one of her arts cards off a round. But on its own, it's not the worst. It still will probably feel lackluster at points, and her defensive rate is slightly lower. Fairly low death rate. Got all the usual stuff. Boy, how'd you get some real super interesting traits there. So, I think her deck is interesting because the other 2 Foreigners we have right now are Saber decks, so Arts, Buster, with Arts NPs, whereas Abigail is Caster type. She's got the 3 Arts cards, but as a Buster NP. But unlike Casters, her damage multiplier is at least 1-0, and she will deal neutral damage to most classes, and extra damage to Foreigners and Berserkers. So there's that. but half damage to, alter egos. So, full damage to most classes, though. So, she has a Buster single target Noble Phantasm. Now, while, obviously, if you talk to people who are playing JP right now, the quote-unquote meta gets away from Buster a little bit, but it's still a single target Buster, so that's a lot of damage, and this has a feature that makes it very, very useful, because her Noble Phantasm, which I am not going to try and pronounce, I have always struggled with that first one. I can say Rhizome fine. It's that first part that I'm not good at. But it removes all buffs from the target enemy before it deals damage, so this is similar to the great thing you do with Amakusa's NP. This is, that guy's invincible, or he's got an evade, or he's got a boatload of defense, or anything. No, I'm just going to take care of that, and then I'm going to hit him with a single target Buster NP. And also, it inflicts critical chance down to the single enemy for one turn. It's a pretty significant percentage, but it's still only one turn. That's pretty... Critical chance down is one of those things, along with, attack down or defense down, that's just we need something to scale with overcharge on this NP, so we'll just give them a stock debuff effect. It's not really on point or on theme, I think, but she does have a fair amount of debuffs, so... Interestingly, despite the Noble Phantasm being Buster with her 3 arts cards in her setup, Abigail could fit into arts-focused stall teams. Crit Down is a stall effect, she has the arts cards for it, and some other support abilities, which we'll talk about now when we talk about her skills. So, start off, her first skill. This one has a long cooldown, which is a bit of a shame, but it has some decent effects. All allies, including herself, gain 10% MP per turn, and this is at level 1. So, this never goes up, so you just get a 30% total battery over 3 turns. This can really help her NP gen and help other people in the team if they're struggling move it along. It also increases all allies' NP strength for 3 turns, 20 to 30%. So, gives her a little bit of a damage steroid if you're spamming, which you might possibly be doing if you're doing, NP up per turn and all that. That can help out with that elongated... 20 to 30 is not the biggest buff, but it's a pretty decent one, and it'll help round up that damage, especially if she is actually targeting somebody neutral and you're using it more to do the special, remove buffs thing. Second one is Loss of Sanity. So this one also has a pretty high cooldown, but that's because it's got a Fear debuff. So Fear, I believe Caster Gills has that already. But Fear is similar to Fumakotaro's Confusion. Fear does a stun check at the end of every turn for those 3 turns, and then if it pops, the Fear effect goes away, but it can possibly pop anywhere in there for those 3 turns. And it starts at 30 to 50%. Not the best. Honestly, this could probably do with a Strengthen to up that stun chance. But it's still a stun chance to everybody for 3 turns that sits around a little bit. Not good for consistent stall play, but could still help you out. It also decreases all enemies' defense from 10 to 20% for 3 turns. That's also not bad, because remember the way the math works, a 20% defense down is almost the same as a 20% attack up on your guys. So it basically means the amount of damage you do is increased 20%. Not awful. And then we have Witch Trial. This reduces the target enemy's attack, 10 to 20%, and then reduces their NP gauge by 1. Which is not awful, and like I said, this makes Abigail fit into a stall method. It can, kind of push off turns for a final damage. If I had to say anything overall, because there has been some people have, critiqued a little that other later Foreigners are better. I don't know about that. I think if Abigail has any problems, it's mostly that all of her skills have really long cooldowns. Yes, they're all the same length, but they're still 7 turns. Now, if you were, pairing her with, a Tamamo, because Tamamo will get a buff that means she increases NP damage, and it's going to make Abigail's non-NP cards do more damage, so you can shoot more Buster NPs. When you're reducing those skill cooldowns and stuff, sure, that's fine. And you can't really be mad about stuns and about NP gauge reduction. No chance at NP gauge reduction either, it just does it. But the 7-turn cooldown for some of these effects is a little long. I would want them to maybe... She hasn't been buffed yet, and she might not need it directly, but I would say maybe 1 or 2 of these could use, either they could Kiara her and actually, adjust some of these cooldowns, or they could up some percentages a little bit, because she's not breaking any banks like this. And honestly, like I said, her NP is Buster, but she's not really focused on that damage type, so while Merlin is very generalist, you're not gonna, get any extra mileage out of popping Hero Creation on her necessarily. That's going to be like, okay, I damage my steroids, and then hopefully I get some stars, and I can do arts crits, I guess. You know. So let's talk about her passives. She has a new passive ability that is the unique special foreigner passive. Transcendental existence, or existence outside the domain. So this increases your debuff resist by a set amount. Hers is EX, so it's 12%, a pretty decent one. And also, flat gives you 2 critical stars at the end of every turn. Her star generation is fairly in the middle. She does have a decent number of hit counts on her Quicken Buster card, so the little 2 extra can go a little bit of mileage, but it's not a make-or-break thing. Mostly that debuff resist is what you're going to like, because she's a damage dealer who doesn't have a lot of protection in that regard. She has a new buff, Insanity B, which is basically, it's like Madness Enhancement, but she's actually insane? I don't know necessarily how that works. I'd have to double check her Matt's profile if it commented at all. But basically, she's got a passive 8% Buster adjustment, so her 1 Buster card will hit a little bit stronger than you'd think if you're trying to build a big hitting chain, like maybe an NPBQ or something. And obviously, that's a little bit more enhancement on her NP. And she also has Divinity for reasons, which gives her a very slight uptick on the damage. Not a lot, but that little extra pinch of damage can be helpful sometimes. Overall, I think that without a huge wealth of foreigners, you can't say that Abby is bad, because there's only 3 of them, and they can do slightly different things at slightly different times. Abigail kind of broadly covers a couple of archetypes, because, like I said, with her caster-focused deck, and with a lot of her skill set, she would fit inside a stall team, but that Buster NP might make people think, oh, I'll do something else. And obviously, you can mix and match archetypes. You could, for instance, if you were building a team specifically to use Abigail for, like, CQs and stuff, is probably a good one, because she can purge a lot of those bothersome debuffs and just stuff like NP gauge down or chance to stun. You could probably go, like, maybe not double Merlin, but, like, mix Merlin Talmo, especially after Talmo gets that buff. I believe that'll be early a year from now. Like, not next calendar year, but a physical 365 plus days from now. It's somewhere in there. I'd have to double check. But anyway, doesn't matter. There will be some additional buff to some of your support units that make them really good. And then you can take that extra mile with her, and you can kind of capitalize on that. But I don't think she quite goes to the, oh, this is the perfect solution for this, right? If you don't have any alter egos at all, if you somehow missed Halloween but managed to roll Abby, and you need a thing to kill foreigner bosses, that's fine. And I think overall, the primary advantage is in the inherent foreigner abilities, because another thing you might be using foreigners for is like, oh shoot, I have to deal with a berserker boss. Normally when you deal with those, it's kind of a race to the finish line, because you have to try and outdamage them before they outdamage you. But if you have, half damage on them, then you can actually counterattack a little bit, and Abigail kind of has the right setup for that. But overall, I don't think her current skill set and passives really take her over the top in any one aspect. Now, CE selection, that kind of stuff, I would say you probably want to lean into anything that makes her, well, first of all, starting NP, probably not a bad idea, but you need support with her since she has no battery. So anything that helps NP gain is probably good. Depending on what your team comp is, you might go different ways. If you're trying to do damage, I'd say go whole hog in on NP power. Probably not Black Grail, because I don't know if you're going to get that NP to charge as fast as you like. Even with decent HP, that's, asking for trouble. But, stuff like Heaven's Feel and so on. Increase that NP damage, increase that Buster damage. Maybe even try to increase her criticals so that when you do actually land a crit on that quicker arts or something, you're making it matter. If you're trying to make her spammer NP, then it's like, make those arts cards better, make that NP gain better, do all that stuff. And it really depends on how you're working with it. And then, like I said, the team comp is just whatever you have that you think works. Waver, obviously, as the universal NP battery plus damage man. The only support I can guarantee you probably don't want to use is Scotty, just because she is hyper-focused on quick. But Merlin or Tamamo is, the other color supports could work. And in general, you're going to want to try and use as many of Abby's cards in a turn as you can, or guarantee an arts chain with her in it. Just so you can get to that, ready to fire that NP when you need it, because that's probably what you're using her for, is to get that buff strip and then big damage effect. Which means, like I said, because she's removing any possible defensive buffs they have, she has decent baseline damage. You can give her like a 30% NP plus with that first skill. You can give them, 20% defense down on top of her other passives. If you're fighting a berserker, that NP is going to hurt him before you even add anything extra in there. So let's talk about Rarity. Guess what? She's freaking rare. This is the other big thing why you may be rolling now, because you're not going to get a lot of opportunities. There's the upcoming Salem 2 banner, where she is the 5-star, and appears alongside Caster of Midrash, a 4-star. And then in Japan, what is the 15 million downloads campaign, which was in 2018, so that'll be November next year. That's it. She hasn't appeared again. Now, with the GSSR, the guaranteed SSR banners, where you put in a little extra quartz, which we'll probably be switching, if not at New Year's, definitely at the anniversary, we'll be switching to half price. Like, you can do it with, you still have to do it with paid quartz, but you can do it with less. They've started to get enough extra characters that extra ends up in its own category a lot more. When it's, for instance, extra will be its own class, and the class setups and other such areas kind of work together, so you've definitely got a slightly better chance of getting her in there, but in general, yes, she's rare. So, if you like her, you better be rolling when it counts. So, this has been Wanted. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be sure to keep hitting you up with some Wanteds. Look for Wanted or Rescue Call soon because of stuff. And of course, tune in later this week for Let's Talk FGO, our regular FGO podcast, where we will talk about all those kinds of stuff. Talk about Salem as a chapter. Or maybe we did already, who knows? All kinds of fun things. Sorry, I lost my voice for half a tick there. You can also check out our general podcast, What's Up, and other videos on our channel. So, there's really no point in keeping you. You have stuff to do. Pancakes to make. I don't know. Whatever. So, we'll go ahead and wind on down. If you like this episode, be sure to give it a like. If you have any comments, leave in the comment section down below, or you can hit us up on our Discord, that link is in the description, and on our channel page. And of course, if you're new here and haven't already, please subscribe to our channel so you can always get our latest videos, like Wanted and Let's Talk FGO. And even if you're already subscribed, considering that bell for notifications, so you always know when we post a new video, because we do tend to do it pretty lickety-split before a banner drops. And of course, like I said at the front of the show, you should also consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early, get shoutouts, listen to shows live, lots of other goodies, and it really helps us out. So, yeah, I'll see you next Wanted, when those sleigh bells are jingling. By the way, the intro song was Yog-Sothoth by The Darkest of the Hillside Thickets, my favorite obscure band about H.P. Lovecraft stuff. You should check them out on YouTube. Alright, now I really am gonna go bye.